those that don't know me, I'm Chief Alan Aldenberg. It's ALDENBERG, Chief of Police for Manchester Police Department. I want to come back together today to highlight the vast support we've got from the community in regards to the reward money that's come forward thus far. It's been 2 weeks since the Manchester Police has opened a missing person case for 7-year-old Harmony Montgomery. And in that time, the citizens of Manchester and surrounding cities and towns and states have consistently showed their support and willingness to help. As of today, the fund has grown to $104,000. Tips continue to come in through our dedicated tip line, and numerous people have offered their monetary support. Today we received another $4,000 in pledges towards the reward for credible information that leads to the location, that leads my detectives to locating Harmony. As I said before, $104,000 thus far. We've received approximately 300 tips. All of them are being investigated, vetted out. Every single one is being taken serious. So we ask that people continue to call that dedicated tip line at 603-203-6060 with any information that they think is relevant to this investigation. So with that, I'll take a couple of questions, but bear in mind I'm not going to touch on anything specific to the investigation. Amy?
Chief, if someone didn't come forward at the $20,000 mark or the $50,000 mark, will 104 be the threshold? And what does it?
I don't know the threshold, Amy. I wish I did, right? What's going to be enough, or what's going to strike people's conscience enough? Instead of, maybe it's just, somebody out there, like I said before, Amy, somebody out there knows something. And whatever strikes at people's, conscience as a human being, to step forward and do the right thing, whatever it takes is what we're gonna keep trying doing. So, if people still want to dedicate to that fund that we've established, they can call in. They'll be put in touch most likely with Assistant Chief Steve Mangoni, and he will facilitate that process like he's been doing thus far. I wish, I would hope that it wouldn't take money for somebody to do the right thing, but people have different motivators in their life. So if money is one of them, then come forward with some relevant and viable information and let us take it from there.
Chief, what can you say about the quality of the tips that you are getting? You said the number is about 300 tips that you started the tip line?
Yeah.
So is that what you expected? Is it lagging? Is it?
I don't know what to expect on, I have nothing to measure it against.
Yeah.
Certainly the things like this have happened in the past, but what's an appropriate number at this point, I don't know. Some of them are, extreme in terms of, I think you know what I'm getting at. And some, that's what detectives have to do. They have to screen every single one out, no matter how extreme we may think it is at first glance. But let's vet it out and let's determine if it is a viable tip.
The FBI and Manchester Police wrapped up a multi-day search over on Guilford Street. Any searches planned at this stage?
Again, I'm not going to comment anything specific to the investigation. I can just confirm that at this time we've wrapped up over at the Guilford Street address, and I want to also publicly thank the homeowner who's been nothing but cooperative with this investigation, and I ask that you all continue to respect their privacy.
Sure.
I do appreciate that.
For your guys, your men and women investigating this.
What was the first part?
How frustrating this is, if you can speak to that this little girl, despite multi-day search, despite a $100,000 reward and all the tips that are coming in, it seems to us anyway, that there's still no sign of what happened to that little girl.
I don't think discouraged is the way to describe their behavior or their attitude right now. I would describe it as determined. Coming in, long hours, long days. A detective's taken that tip phone, that dedicated number, home with them, and sitting at home and getting woken up when the text goes off and the phone rings. And so that's why I say they're determined. So discouraged, I'm probably if I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little discouraged, but we remain determined on finding Harmony and bringing her home to the people that care for her.
It's frustrating though, right now, to have these answers.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but we're going to stay after it. And that's why I want to get back out here today to keep this story fresh. And I do appreciate all that the media has done on our behalf to keep the story out there. So again, I ask that you continue to do that, and I'll continue to be as upfront and transparent with all of you as I can relative to the investigation.
Chief, we've been exploring the dynamic with
Go ahead.
With calls for service to 77 Guilford Street. And I think it's, my question is, when we pulled the calls for service, we could see when it was indicated, DCYF notified, DCYF notified. My question is, do they close that circuit with police? If that agency responds to that address, do they contact you guys and say, hey, we went by?
Not all the time, no. No, we have pretty established procedures and protocols here that have been in place for many years, very redundant system relative to how we report things at DCYF. We're a mandatory reporter like many other state agencies, many other agencies in this state. So we make many referrals to DCYF on a daily basis. So they'll be notified by us. Generally, they'll generate a letter back notifying us essentially that they received that correspondence, and if they need any further assistance from us from a criminal side, a criminal perspective, then they will involve us in that investigation. So they may get notified by us, hey, thank you, we received it. At this point, there's no criminal aspect, and we're involving other state agencies, other services with the family to hopefully bring it to a appropriate resolution.
And I just want to verify, were they the notifying agency that started this missing persons case? We established that, right?
Yes, I can tell you that when we were notified, again, I don't want to get too depth into the timeline, but we've been working with DCYF in terms of this investigation, and like I said before, we opened our missing person investigation on the 27th of December, after we received additional information that obviously made us draw the conclusion that, okay, we need to open this formal investigation and take this down a different path that we're going down right now.
Are you able to speak at all about any mistakes DCYF may have made? And you mentioned some of the calls to the house, and have you seen some of those?
Yeah, I get that narrative wants to be out there, that the public, the family perhaps, whoever is looking to blame somebody, right? And I think that's a natural reaction when it comes to things like this. I'm just not going to do that right now. I will tell you that I am extremely confident in the work that was done by the Manchester Police Department with our involvement prior to 12/27, dating back, you have them, right? Those many calls for service that we went there. I'm extremely confident I will stand behind the work of this police department that led us up to 12/27, and I stand even firmer behind it from 12/27 to today. I'm not going to point fingers at any other agency because I don't think it's going to do the investigation any good. I'm standing in front of you, okay? I'm the one answering questions. So if that doesn't paint the picture, I'm going to leave it at that. All right?
Can we go back to the reward in terms of who would qualify for the reward?
We need the information first. All right, we need to have what the information is, the information that we receive, and then if that leads us to Harmony, then we will determine how that money will be dispersed out. But I need to know what the information is first before I can accurately answer that question.
One of the tough things here is it seems like the last two people that were in her life are both in jail, the two adults. Is that how tough this is to try to find somebody beyond the two of them to help you in this investigation?
Yeah, it's all part of the investigation. And if the investigation leads us, down another path, then we're going to go down that path. I'm going to go down every path that this investigation takes us to. That's why I got some hard and very dedicated men and women upstairs working very hard, chasing everything down that we can. And it becomes, investigations like this become complex. And there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of dates that need to be figured out and timelines, but we're working on that very hard every day.
Chief, two questions.
Go
One is, why would the AG's office be involved? It's questionable. Number two is,
That raises some eyebrows, but they bring to me resources that I may not be able to get from the county attorney's office. No, I'm not disparaging them, but the attorneys up there are if you will, more versed in these type of investigations, just like they got involved in the Merrimack investigation. All right, separate investigations, but they've been very helpful to me, and I have no doubt that they will continue to do so.
And the second question is we know FBI was involved, DCYF was involved. Are there any other major agencies that are involved right now?
At this time,
State police, are
they know.
Nope.
Nope, but the Colonel Noyes has reached out to me and offered any assistance that he can. I know that was, I believe, if I needed anything from state police, I have no doubt if I called them, they would assist me.
What is the thought thinking about Harmony right now? Do you believe that Harmony's still alive?
I'm going to, until, I've said it before, and it's a good question. You know, I have to remain hopeful, all right? The public has to remain hopeful. And that's what I keep going back to, somebody knows something. Until somebody tells me otherwise, or shows me something concrete and valuable that says that she's not, then this investigation is geared towards as if Harmony is still alive.
So the last.
Wouldn't you want that for you?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For my child, absolutely. So the multi-day search of Guilford Street did not result in finding Harmony. I know you haven't talked about whatever evidence may have been pulled out of there, but is there some other place that you want to draw people's attention to? Because if it's not that house, they're in a car, and going back and forth, where else should people kind of draw their attention to and try to think of, did you see this little girl?
That's why I'm trying to get this nationwide, and it has gone nationwide, it's gone international, all right? That's a good question, Bob, but I don't want to comment on that with, you know, to compromise the investigation. I can tell you that should we get anything like that, that we feel that the public could help us in regards to a particular location or a particular state, I feel it would be appropriate to share that. But right now, doing so would not be, it's not going to add any value to the investigation right
So
now.
the last time that the Manchester police saw her was September 2019, 11th, I think. DCYF about a month later, and then the family says that the extended family said they last saw her around Thanksgiving, the first week of December. Is that?
Yeah, and I think when I first met with, back on New Year's Eve,
Yeah.
it was my fault, I had given it an appropriate
Yeah.
date. But it doesn't change the overall timeline, all right? The last time that MPD saw Harmony Montgomery was on September 11th of 19. And believe that report is already out there because many of you done a right to know request on that. So that is the last time that Manchester Police saw Harmony Montgomery for a call for service over there, which was documented in a report, and that report was referred to DCYF.
And then, what is the, do you have a date that you're all working on? Is the last time that anyone has actually seen her beyond September 11th, 19?
We're going with, I'm sorry, one more time?
Do you, as you investigate this, do you have your own date that the law enforcement is looking at as, this is the last time we know that anybody saw Harmony Montgomery?
It's that October, November timeframe of 19.
So what the step-grandmother is saying about day after Thanksgiving to December 6th, that's what she's saying, but you're going with something a little bit earlier than that, right?
Again, that October, November timeframe of 19 is what we're operating on for right now, and I don't want to go any further on that in terms of the investigation.
We know that the father and the stepmother are in custody right now. Do you access them to ask them questions? How does the...
There's a process in place. You know, if those two people want to talk to the Manchester Police Department about this case, that can happen anytime, any place. And there's a process in place for that to happen through their legal counsel. And the door's open, the phone's open. I don't care if it's 2 in the morning, we'll be available to have that discussion if they want.
Would they qualify for the reward?
Depends on the information. All right, I need to know what that information is in order to even remotely try to answer that question.
Chief, what about looking outside New Hampshire, into Massachusetts and beyond? Is that something that are the digital billboards going up? Have you thought about it? Are you guys thinking of putting that in a plan?
We have digital billboards out there. We also have
In New Hampshire, right?
in New Hampshire. We also have the gas station monitors, if you will. Those are up and running. And I can confirm, but I think we are on billboards in other states. All right, we are.
So it's something that you are considering that she could be, it could have been taken, and she might be something
Yeah,
else.
could be, I mean, I can't just focus on Manchester, New Hampshire for this investigation, right? That would be negligent to do so. So as broad as a net as we can cast, that's what we intend to do. And again, that's why I felt it was important to come back out again, and I will continue to do so. So with that, I'll leave it at that. I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate you guys keeping Harmony's, her name and her face out there, and I ask that you continue to do so.
Just one little thing. Can you give us a sense when people reach out and say they want to add to that reward pot, what they're saying, what's motivating them? What's that conversation? Any kind of concept?
I think they just, they care for another human being, all right? They care for a little girl who's unaccounted for. And it's their way of, what can I do? And if it's right now that all I can do is, not all, but if my part is giving money to a fund that may bring her home, then, yeah, we welcome that. Absolutely.
I mean, it's heartbreaking to think this is a third winter. We're going to the third winter that she hasn't had one. We don't know what she is.
We're going to find out. All right? Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks.